leadership, foreign aid, knowledge of the land, and motivation. We talked about the Treaty of Paris of 1783. Make sure you definitely know that. Make sure, let's see, have your books open at 214 also. We talked about the cost of the war, the amount of people who died. We had about 25,000 to the British 10,000. Our $27 million debt. Soldiers weren't paid. Instead, they were given certificates for land. And now we're at the point to try to figure out some of the issues that we've got that we have to deal with. So on 214 and 215, it talks about some of the issues that our country, our brand new country, has now that the war is over. Because before the war, what we really wanted was our right to be, recognized and just to follow our rights, because they weren't following our rights. We wanted our rights. And so now the war is over, and we're away from Britain, but now we're our own country and have to figure out what to do. So I want you to take a look through there and see what are the big issues that we're going to have to start dealing with. Okay, take a look through there. 214 to give me an issue that our country is now having to deal with after the war.
Individuals have to place the good of our country. Wait,
Don?
Americans have demanded their rights as English citizens.
This is something that was before the war. We wanted our rights. But what are some things after the war that we now have to figure out how to deal with? Gary, give me one.
Who's going to be in charge?
Who will be in charge? What else? What are some other things we have to deal with, some other issues? Drake, you got one? Yes, you.
What was it?
What are... It's on the board. Issues after the war.
Only. Alright, never mind. I don't know.
Garrett already gave us one. He knows the other two. Cody, do you know one?
Shaping the government.
Shaping the government. What's another one? Dustin, you got it? PJ?
Changing the laws.
Changing laws, which goes with the governing the country. Drake Dodson?
Slavery.
Slavery. What's another one? Lauren?
Women's rights.
Women's rights, yeah, the sort of.
Religious freedom.
Religious freedom. Big one. Women's rights, not so much, really. We'll start with this first one. The governing of the country. Who's going to be in charge? How are we going to govern the country? How do we want it to look? How are we going to shape it? And so what is the big goal? What type of a government did they say we want? Bromley? Republicanism. And Mallory, what is republicanism?
It's like a thing like we want people instead of having.
Yes, it's the idea where people would rule rather than a king. And they didn't like being ruled under a king with Britain, so now instead they're going to have the people rule. The citizens and everybody would be responsible to the government. How would something like that work? If you're putting the people in charge, how is something like that going to work? What did they say needs to happen for this to work? Noah?
For it to work, individuals would have to place the good of the country above their own interests.
Yep. You have to put the country above yourself. Okay? At first, only men were able to do this, and not all men. White men. Women had nothing to do with the government. But what was women's role, really? What was the role of women, Drake Peterson?
They could teach children the virtues that benefited public life.
So basically, they're going to be able to teach children, and they're teaching them honesty, willing to make sacrifices, and things like that. So women became the teaching of the children, and it's still nothing to do with the government. We also mentioned religion being one. One of the reasons they came over here was for religious freedom. Now, they want more religious freedom. first Jewish people, Catholics, they were not able to hold public office. That changed. People started to abolish those types of laws. They also stopped using people's tax monies to support the church. Okay, so they started to give more religious freedom. I suppose a lot of different states were passing new laws and making it a little bit more widespread. And slavery. Are we going to have slaves or not? Some states started to abolish it and outlawed it. Most of them didn't, especially in the South. But the big question was, what are we going to do about slavery? Well, this doesn't get answered for a long time. Some slaves were able to get free. One slave it talked about sued for her freedom. She won.
It's kind of funny her last name is Freeman.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? Freeman. Others started to start groups and societies for African Americans. You had churches that were set up just for African Americans. But the biggest issue of these three was how we're going to govern the country. What's that going to look like? And actually that goes we'll just trickle right into governing the country and and creating the Constitution. But before the Constitution comes something else that fails, basically, and we don't get right away to our Constitution. So we'll talk about that more next chapter. All right, any questions on the stuff after the war, the cost of the war, why we won, any issues? Okay.